Your conscience didn't stop you from making love to me, did it? It didn't bother you when I was in your arms. What about your feelings then?
Hello to all the classic people that are returning. I'm glad you're back. I want to welcome any new visitors, and there will be spoilers ahead. Today on Classic Movie Review, we are taking on Film Noir, Human Desire, 1954. It had an earlier French version in 1938 with the same name, except in French. Before we get going, I want to shout out to Thunderbird for his comments on Lady in the Lake, 1946. It was a sore-tailed cat. I'm working on that English language thing. Also to David for the email about the passing of Sidney Poitier. I plan on pushing In the Heat of the Night 1967 up the to-do list as an homage to Poitier. Please keep sending those emails and comments. They are much appreciated. When I find a film noir that stars Gloria Graham, Glenn Ford, and Brodrick Crawford, I expect it to be good. Add in the direction of Fritz Lang and the original story by Emile Zola, I expect it to be good. Not so much with this film. It's okay, and I always enjoy seeing Gloria Graham. I'm not saying I wouldn't watch it, but it could be a lot better. This movie has a 7.1 rating on IMDb.com. On RottenTomatoes.com, the film has a 59% score on the tomato meter and a 71% audience approval. New York Times film critic Bosley Crothers fairly hated this film and said in an August 7, 1954 review, quote, "Among the associated troubles with Columbia's Human Desire, which was deposited with 8 acts of vaudeville at the Palace yesterday, is that there isn't a single character in it for whom it builds up the slightest sympathy. And there isn't a great deal else in it for which you're likely to have the least regard. Gloria Graham, as a no-good married woman, who spreads her favors as indifferently as she spreads her bed, is as wholly devoid of fascination as a lush on a stool in a saloon. Brodrick Crawford, as her wildly jealous husband who kills a man because of her, is dreary too. And Glenn Ford, as a locomotive driver who briefly cottons to the dame, is just plain dull." Unquote. Whew. Man, Graham was pretty good in this movie though, in spite of everything. On my ever-changing list of all film noir movies, I've slotted today's film at number 121. Actors.
Right, and I'm a Shakespearean actor.
Glenn Ford played Jeff Warren, a returning Korean conflict veteran. Ford was first covered in the dark drama Blackboard Jungle, 1955. Gloria Graham played Vicky Buckley, a mistreated woman forced to use all she had as a defense. Graham was first covered in It's a Wonderful Life, 1946. Brodrick Crawford played Carl Buckley. Crawford was born in 1911 in Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection. His parents and grandparents were vaudevillians, so he clearly went to work with his parents. Crawford was accepted to Harvard College but left after 3 weeks to work as a stevedore. He eventually returned to vaudeville and began working on radio. In 1937, Crawford had a Broadway hit playing Lenny in Of Mice and Men. Crawford moved to Hollywood and obtained a role in Woman Chases Man, 1937. A burly and tough-looking man, Crawford was confined to supporting roles such as in Larceny Incorporated, 1942. Crawford joined the U.S. Army Air Force and was assigned to work as a radio announcer. Following World War II, one film he was in was Black Angel, 1946. In 1949, Crawford starred in his best-known role, Governor Willie Stark in All the King's Men, 1949. He won the Best Actor in a Leading Role Oscar for this role. His next film of note was a hilarious comedy, Born Yesterday, 1950, with Judy Holliday and William Holden. Crawford's career evolved into mainly playing tough guys in film noirs and westerns. He was great in these roles. Some of these movies are Last of the Comanches, 1953, a western remake of Sahara, 1943, Film Noir's Human Desire, 1954, Down Three Dark Streets, 1954, New York Confidential, 1955, Big House USA, 1955, and the western Fastest Gun Alive, 1956 with Glenn Ford. Crawford had a long-running television series, Highway Patrol, from 1955 to 1959. He continued to make movies and appear on television until 1982. Crawford died in 1986. Kathleen Case played Ford's neglected girlfriend, Ellen Simmons. Case was born in Pennsylvania in 1933. She attended the Ursuline Academy in Pittsburgh and debuted on the stage at age 11. She worked as a dancer before signing a contract with Columbia. Case had her first uncredited role in 1951. Her best-known films include Flight Nurse 1953, Human Desire 1954, Running Wild 1955, and Calling Homicide 1956. Case had a successful television career that lasted until 1961. She died in 1979 at the young age of 45. Edgar Buchanan played Ford's co-worker, landlord, and jilted girlfriend's father, Alex Simmons. Buchanan was born in Missouri in 1903. When Buchanan was 7 years old, he moved with his family to Oregon. Like his father, Buchanan became a dentist and practiced in Oregon from 1929 to 1937. He then moved to California. In California, Buchanan joined the Pasadena Community Playhouse. At the age of 36, he gave up dentistry for acting. During his long career, Buchanan was in over 100 films and was prolific on television. His first film role was in 1939, and some of his better-known films include The Seahawk 1940, Texas 1941, The Bandit of Sherwood Forest 1946, Framed 1947, A Man from Colorado 1948, The Great Missouri Raid 1951, Rawhide 1951, Shane 1953, Human Desire 1954, Destry 1954. Don't watch this movie. Watch the Jimmy Stewart version. The Sheep Man 1958, Cimarron 1960, Donovan's Reef 1963, McClintock 1963, The Rounders 1965, and his last film, Benji 1974. You probably noticed from that list that Glenn Ford was in a lot of those movies. I think they made 16 together. That would be enough of a career for anyone, but Buchanan's television career is just as impressive. He is known to my generation as Lazy Uncle Joe from the Shady Rest Hotel on Petticoat Junction, 1963 to 1970. The character of Uncle Joe also appeared on Green Acres, 1965 to 1969, and The Beverly Hillbillies in 1968. Buchanan remained popular on television until the end of his career. He died in 1979. Dan Seymour had a small uncredited role as bartender Dugan. Seymour was born in Chicago in 1915. He attended high school in Chicago and graduated from the University of Chicago. While in school, Seymour acted and emceed. He moved to Hollywood and had a bit part in Bombs Over Burma 1942, which starred Anna Mae Wong. He also had a bit part in Casablanca 1942. He was very successful playing dark, heavy, mostly bad guys in film and television. His best-known films include To Have and Have Not 1944, Cloak and Dagger 1946, Key Largo 1948, Abbott and Costello and the Foreign Legion 1950, Rancho Notorious 1952, Mara Maru 1952, The Big Heat 1953, Human Desire 1954, and Escape to Witch Mountain 1975. Seymour was very successful on television. To me, he is best known for playing 7 different roles on Perry Mason 1957 to 1965, and for playing the Maharaja on Batman 1966. Seymour stopped acting in 1978 and died in 1993. Story.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
The movie begins with a train rolling through the countryside as the credits roll. Jeff Warren, Glenn Ford, is the train's engineer, and he is very laid back. He casually signals his co-worker, Alex Simmons, Edgar Buchanan, for a light. Alex is happy that they have brought the train in on time. People around the depot welcome Jeff back from the Korean conflict. The engine is turned around and put in the maintenance barn. Jeff and Alex go to the yard office. The tough yardmaster gives him a begrudging welcome back. The clerk tells Jeff that he will have to make another run in the morning and deadhead back on a different train. Jeff mentions that he is staying at Alex's house. They run into Carl Buckley, Brodrick Crawford, as they walk across the yard. Carl has moved up from engineer to assistant yard manager in the 3 years Jeff has been gone. Carl mentions that he is now married. Carl is then called to the yardmaster's office. At Alex's home, Jeff is greeted by Mrs. Simmons, Dana Delary, and later by the couple's daughter, Ellen Simmons, Kathleen Case. Jeff comments on how she has grown while he has been gone. Ellen takes Jeff to her room. He has brought Ellen a silk kimono from Tokyo. It is clear they are interested in each other and plan to date. Carl goes home to his small house located near the railroad. His wife, Vicki Buckley, Gloria Graham, is admiring her legs. She seems to be bored as a housewife. Carl had gotten into an argument with the yardmaster and was fired. Vicki wants to try a new town, but Carl is not having it. He rebuffs Vicki for offering to get a job. Carl asks Vicki to speak to a male friend of hers, John Owens, Grandin Rhodes, a big shipper who could help Carl get his job back.
You can get another job.
What other job? All I know is railroading. 5 years, I would have got a pension.
There's nothing to worry about. I worked before we got married. I can work again.
Wait a minute. I don't want my wife working. I didn't marry her so you could take care of me. I've been thinking. What about this fella, Owens? You think he could put in a good word for me?
Mr. Owens? Why Mr. Owens?
He's a big shipper. He does a lot of business with the railroad.
Vicki's mother used to be Owens' housekeeper. Vicki is against the idea of talking to Owens. Carl pouts and begins drinking. Vicki agrees to call Owens. In the morning, Carl and Vicki ride to a larger town on Jeff's train. Vicki is very distant. She has arranged to use her friend Jean's, Peggy Malley's, apartment. Carl waits at the apartment while Vicki goes to see Owens. She is known to Owens' secretary. Owens is happy to see Vicki and does elevator eyes before giving her a pat. Jean is getting dressed as Carl waits impatiently. Vicki is very late coming back from the meeting. Jean leaves for a date before Vicki makes it back. When she arrives, Vicki tells Carl that he has his job back because Owens made the call. Carl tries to embrace Vicki, but she quickly pulls away, saying she is hot and tired. Carl starts questioning Vicki about being gone for 5 hours. She says her and Owens went out for a drink. Carl becomes increasingly suspicious and aggressive. Vicki mocks Carl and tries to get into the shower.
I didn't keep track of the time. I was trying to get you your job back.
And he was glad to help you. Did you thank him?
Of course.
How?
Exactly what does that mean?
What has he got, a private apartment he can drop into for a drink? Is that the bar you went to?
Of course. And we had champagne, buckets of champagne. And he has a bear rug in front of the fireplace. And we toasted marshmallows all afternoon. Now will you stop being so stupid and let me take my shower?
When Carl grabs her, she says she is tired of being pawed over by all of you. Carl begins slapping Vicki and accusing her of cheating. She confesses under the threat of being beaten. He drags her into the main room and forces her to write a message to Owens. In the train station, a messenger is paging John Owens. Owens gets the message while Carl and Vicki wait by the phone bank. The message Vicki was forced to write says her husband is staying in town and she will come to his compartment after the train leaves the station. Carl is heavy-handed as he leads Vicki to the train. Having finished his run, Jeff also boards the train to deadhead back to home. Carl and Vicki wait in their compartment. Carl forces her to go to Owens' room. When the door opens, Carl forces Vicki inside. It is not shown, but Carl kills Owens with a knife and then robs him. He takes the note that Vicki wrote as well. She is plastered against the wall in terror the whole time. When they think the coast is clear, Carl and Vicki head towards their cabin. They are stopped when they see Jeff on the landing between the two cars taking a smoke break. They are forced back the other way and have to hide in the dead man's cabin when a conductor comes by. Carl orders Vicki to get Jeff out of the way so Carl can make it back to their compartment. He says he doesn't care how. Vicki puts on lipstick as she heads back. Vicki makes small talk with Jeff and they decide to go to the club car for a drink. She pretends to have something in her eye to draw him in close. Carl heads back to his compartment. Jeff tells Vicki that the club car is closed and they pick a cabin where they can have a smoke.
I'll leave the door open just in case.
In case what?
In case one of us gets nervous.
Do I look nervous?
Yeah, just a little bit.
Finally, Jeff and Vicki get kissy face. She leaves in a hurry. When she returns to her cabin, Carl is standing in the dark with his knife, and he's covered with blood. The train makes it back home, where Carl and Vicky try to get off without running into anyone they know. They bump straight into Jeff. Carl introduces his wife, while Vicky and Jeff act weird. Back at home, Carl burns his bloody clothes. Vicky is in a strange mood and questions Carl about robbing Owens. She tries to find the note, but Carl keeps the note, keeping her trapped in the marriage. Back at the other home, Ellen is trying to cozy up to Jeff. Mrs. Simmons tells that Vicky used to work in the big city train station magazine shop. Alex comes in and tells everyone they've found a murder victim on the train. The police are searching the rail car. An inquiry into the murder is held, and all the people known to be on the train at the time of the murder are called to testify. The brakeman testifies that Jeff was the only one seen in the corridor near the murder. The passengers are made to stand up. Although Vicky is present, Jeff lies and says he didn't see any of these people in the corridor. Later, Carl and Vicky are in a local bar drinking. Vicky remains in a funk. Jeff sees the pair and enters the bar. The bartender, Dugan, Dan Seymour, serves the drinks as Jeff joins the couple. A stranger puts some snappy music on the jukebox and asks Vicky to dance. Carl gets into a scrap with the man. Jeff thinks Carl has had enough to drink, and he helps Vicky take the drunk home. Carl staggers off to bed while Jeff and Vicky stand awkwardly in the living room. Vicky lays the sugar on thick, and Jeff wants to know how she is connected to the murder. She says she went to Owens' room and found her old friend already dead. Vicky says that Carl didn't know because he would go crazy if he knew she was visiting another man. Vicky mentions the abuse she has suffered at the hands of Carl.
You don't know what my life's been like. You don't know my husband.
I used to know Carl pretty well.
Nobody knows him. Nobody but me. I couldn't tell him I went to Owens' compartment that night. I wouldn't dare. He'd suspect something awful. I don't know what he might have done to me.
Carl? Doesn't seem to fit somehow.
Jeff is trying to understand her actions until she reveals the bruises on her body and falls into Jeff's arms. Later, Jeff is happy because of his new friend. Carl is drinking more as his relationship with Vicky sours. She won't look at him or talk to him. When he touches her, she pulls away. The idea of the murder is horrifying her. She wants the note destroyed, and he goes into a rage. Carl has hidden the watch and the money from the crime in a heater vent. Vicky sees the location and goes there after Carl leaves the house. However, the note is somewhere else. Vicky calls the Simmons house and sets a rendezvous with Jeff. The pair stroll through the rail yard as Vicky tells of her troubles. Jeff agrees with her feelings of coldness. Vicky asks about the war and how hard it is to kill a man. Jeff says it's the easiest thing in the world to kill someone. The two have to hide when a workman comes through the yard. They make plans to meet at Jean's apartment in the big city. They kiss and are illuminated by a train light. Jeff is on the train getting ready to go when Ellen comes to sell him tickets to a dance. She asks about the dance and mentions that Vicky is pretty. Ellen says that all of the phone calls and her intuition has let her know that Jeff and Vicky are seeing each other. Ellen leaves the dance tickets on the wall as she leaves crying. Vicky boards the train. Alex begins to question Jeff about his actions. Jeff gets a little hostile, but Alex says in a small town people notice things and that he should stay away from married women.
You've been taking long walks every night the last couple of weeks.
What do you want me to do? Punch a time clock?
I was just asking. This is a small town, Jeff. People notice things.
Yeah.
You think something's on the quiet that turns out everybody knows. Stay away from her. You shouldn't fool around with a married woman. No good. Ain't right.
Sunday's my day for sermons.
At Jean's apartment, Jeff asks Vicky to leave Carl because they love each other. Vicky finally confesses that Carl murdered Owens. She says she was there when the murder took place. Vicky tells of the beating before she was made to write the note. She says she was innocent and forced to go along with Carl. She tells about Carl having the note. Jeff thinks Vicky told him the story to make him an accomplice. When she cries, Jeff is all in for the crime. Jeff and Alex are very tense during their work. When Jeff gets down from his train, he sees Carl walking like a zombie. The man has lost the will to live. That night, Ellen lets Jeff know that Vicky has called. Ellen thinks there may be a chance for her and Jeff. She asks Jeff about the simple things he wanted when he returned from the army. Ellen talks about love and then storms out of the room. Jeff goes to Vicky's room. She says that Carl has been fired and that they will be leaving the next day. Vicky says she will have to go with Carl as long as he has the note. Jeff says he will get the note. Vicky says this is goodbye, so Jeff can come up with the idea of the murder on his own. Just like it never occurred to him.
If he finds out about us, he'll kill me.
All right, then what do you want to do?
What is there to do? Say goodbye to each other? I'll go with Carl. When I can't bear the sight of him any longer,
That's not the answer.
you'll forget me.
No.
Then she recommends an accident in the rail yard. Carl is at Dugan's bar and is staggering drunk. He staggers away from the bar as Jeff stalks him down the dark streets. Carl cuts across the rail yard and climbs between trains as he heads towards home. Jeff picks a large monkey wrench to use in his murder of Carl. A train passes by, blocking the view of the action. Jeff goes to Vicky and tells her that he didn't do it and that he took the drunk Carl to the dispatcher's office to be sobered up. Vicky is very unhappy with Jeff. Jeff says it was wrong and he feels dirty.
I didn't do it.
Why not?
Maybe because he was drunk, because he fell. I picked him up and took him over to the dispatcher's office. Trying to sober him up with coffee now. He even thought I was trying to help him.
You couldn't kill him. You tried, and you couldn't.
It's all wrong, Vicky. The whole thing's been wrong from the beginning. And I feel dirty.
You feel. Your conscience didn't stop you from making love to me, did it? It didn't bother you when I was in your arms. What about your feelings then?
Vicky does an interesting thing with the lamp, putting her hands on top of the shade, and it puts her in full light and puts Jeff in the dark. Vicky says Carl loved her enough to kill for her. Jeff goes into a recitation on how Vicky played him for a chump and that she was also sleeping with Owens. Vicky responds that Owens has been sexually abusing her since she was 16. The relationship continued until she married Carl and thought she was free from Owens. Vicky says she will do anything to keep Jeff. He pulls her hands away and begins to walk out. He stops and gives her the message, which had been carried in Carl's pocket, freeing her from the marriage. The next day, Vicky gets on the train that Jeff is driving. Jeff looks at the dance tickets he got from Ellen. Carl comes into Vicky's compartment. She didn't know he was on the train. Carl apologizes for everything and tries to touch her. She pushes him away. Carl then offers to give her the note, but finds it gone. Carl thinks Vicky is going away with Jeff. Vicky tells Carl that Jeff walked out on her because she wanted him to murder Carl. She confesses that she's had a long-term relationship with Owens.
Want to get away from me because I'm all washed up.
Oh, sure. How could you understand anything? You're drunken.
I understand. Don't worry about my understanding.
Yes, you understand. You're real bright. See if you can understand this. I'm in love with Jeff, and he walked out on me. You know why? Because I wanted him to kill you, and he couldn't.
Carl snaps and strangles Vicky. Jeff and Alex are getting along now, and it seems the old Ellen-loving Jeff is back. Conclusions. Holy cow. Jeff is guilty of accessory after the fact in Owens' murder, lying in an official inquest, and at least conspiracy to murder Carl. How does he get to live happily ever after? Vicky is a classic example of a femme fatale, but she shouldn't be castigated for this. Owens abused her when she was a child. Carl was brutal and uncaring, and Jeff took advantage of a bad situation. Vicky had neither assets, resources, or physical strength. The only tool left to her was the power of her mind and the beauty of her body to induce men to perform the actions that would keep her safe. Gloria Grahame as Vicky gave a masterclass on manipulating as a femme fatale. Enough preaching. There is some interesting trivia baked into the film. When Jeff gives Ellen the kimono, he says it was from the Tea House of the August Moon, which was a very popular play that ran from 1953 to 56 during the time the film was being made. 2 years later, Ford starred in the movie version, The Tea House of the August Moon, 1956. Also during the fight in Dugan's bar, the song on the jukeboxes put the blame on Maine, a song used in the film noir Gilda, 1946, starring Ford and Rita Hayworth. World famous short summary: happy wife, happy life, or vice versa. This show is now completely free and independent, brought to you without ads. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe and leave a review where you get your podcast. It really helps the show get found. As a technical note, references and citations are listed for each show on the site at classicmovierev.com. Beware the Moors.